everyone, and welcome to the show. This is episode number 8 of Pop Culturally Deprived, and today we're going to be talking about the final 5 episodes of Firefly on your I Can Kill You With My Brain podcast.
Hey, and once again, I'm Sarah, and Matthew and I are back again to finish up the Firefly trilogy. Say hi, Matthew.
Ni hao, Mimi.
Aww.
I'm so cute. No,
Yeah, I'm not your little sister, but okay.
in my heart you are.
Aw, that's sweet.
The episodes we're going to discuss today are War Stories, Trash, The Message, Heart of Gold, and Objects in Space. Respectively, they originally aired on December the 6th, 2002, July 21st, July 28th, and August 4th, 2003, and December 13th, 2002. So that means the first and the last episode of this group were aired a few months after the original episodes we've already discussed. But the middle 3 then took another 7 months to be put on television after the show had been cancelled and after it had been released in other countries.
That's terrible.
It's just weird.
It's confusing, although part of it makes sense because I got confused watching Objects in Space. Watching Objects in Space because a scene in the beginning between Simon and Kaylee, I was like, I've seen this scene before, and it turned out it was in the previously on for Heart of Gold, which was weird because they were not in that order.
That is weird. I have never noticed that.
Yeah, it weirded me out because when I watched Heart of Gold, I was like, I don't remember ever seeing that conversation between Simon and Kaylee. But that happens sometimes. Scenes get cut and then they still end up in the previously on, so I didn't really think much of it, but it was weird in the very next episode when that scene appeared. And so I guess that's just what happens whenever you create a story that's supposed to be cohesive and then your network butchers it and airs it out of order.
I believe there's actually an alternate scene between Inara and Mel from Objects in Space because it had been on before Heart of Gold. They had to take out the reference to her leaving. That scene slightly differently.
Really?
I
Oh.
have completely missed all of this. Now I have to go back and rewatch it again.
I'll start from the top and just keep working through. If you keep watching, it never ends.
Well, I have to wonder if the previously ons that are on Netflix, are they actually the previously ons that were shown when it was aired? Or if it's one of those weird things like the voiceovers, since you, Matthew, didn't get the voiceovers when you watched it. So is it something that Netflix cut together? Is it actually how it aired? I wish I had thought of that before and looked it up.
You know, I don't recall of seeing any previously ons. I've been watching it on Hulu and on DVD, but Hulu because I'm too lazy to actually physically get up and put the DVD in the DVD player. But yeah, I haven't noticed any previously ons, but it might have just been because I was binge watching and then not paying attention to what was in between the episodes.
I've been doing kind of the same thing, but because Firefly isn't on any of the digital platforms over here, I've been watching the MP4s that I ripped from my DVDs off a separate hard drive via my mobile phone to my Chromecast.
Oh, you pirate.
I own them, I have paid for them, it's my content, you can't have it.
Yeah, I don't think that counts as pirating. Although maybe it should since we are watching Space Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't know. That warning at the beginning of DVDs is really scary. Of course, if you're pirating, I guess maybe you don't see the warning.
No, yeah, I haven't ripped that bit to watch it. The episode War Stories was written by Cheryl Kane. She was the story editor on every other episode except for the pilot. Brett Matthews wrote Heart of Gold, and he had served as Joss Whedon's assistant in the 2001-2002 TV season, which had Buffy Season 6 and Angel Season 3. He has since gone on to work particularly on Supernatural and The Vampire Diaries, and recently he's been writing a lot of comic books, including some of the Serenity spin-off comics, Daredevil, Spider-Man, Wolverine. So he's another, Whedon alumnus who has gone quite into Marvel. I wanted to mention Thomas J. Wright as director of Heart of Gold. He has a fantastic list on IMDb. Most notably, he served as producer on the X-Files spin-off Millennium. He also directed episodes of Beauty and the Beast, Highlander, Space Above and Beyond, Angel, CSI, Alias, The Wire, Smallville, Criminal Minds, Bones, Castle, Grey's Anatomy, Constantine, NCIS, and Supernatural. And I feel tired just thinking about that.
That is quite a list.
Yeah, and it's not exhaustive. There is more on there.
What I love about that list, though, is that it's not genre specific. It's not genre specific, and it
Mm.
covers so many shows that I watch across all genres. It's great. And I had no idea this guy was so prolific, and so now I'm going to have to pay attention when I watch all of these shows because I watch most of the ones in that list, actually.
Also, I wasn't aware of the X-Files spinoff. That might be something else to add to your list of things you haven't seen, Mandy.
It might have to be because I didn't know it existed either.
If I'm allowed to cast a vote, no.
Well,
No,
you don't like
no.
In your
Um,
opinion, the X Files ended what after season seven, season
yeah.
six?
The X-Files has about 200 episodes. Millennium has 60 something, and the other spin-off, The Lone Gunman, has about 13.
Wait, there were two X Files
There were two
spinoffs?
X-Files spin-offs, both of which were cancelled without notice, and both of which the finale is actually a later episode of the X-Files when they decided to wrap it up back in the main show.
Huh. The things I learn while podcasting
Yeah,
about the things I don't know.
it's right. And actually, that list we just talked about, there's a thread through there. You mentioned Space Above and Beyond, and that was created by people who worked significantly on the X-Files, Smallville, and Alias particularly as well, going into Constantine. It's a really interesting thread through them.
Okay.
Moving on to actors, Jonathan M. Woodward played Tracy in The Message. He is another actor who has had 3 different roles in 3 different Joss Whedon shows. He is in Buffy, Angel, and now Firefly.
So, fun fact. Today I learned that actors who have appeared in at least 3 Whedon works are called a Whedon hat trick. And at the time Firefly aired, that meant that they had to have been in all of Whedon's works because Buffy, Angel, and Firefly were the only 3 he had had at that point. And so I think that's actually really cool. And about Jonathan Woodward, I actually recognized him first as the character he played in Buffy. He was only in one episode. It was Conversations with Dead People in season 7. And I recognized him as that unnamed character. I'm sure he had a name. I just don't remember what it was. Before I figured out that he was actually the recurring character Knox from Angels season 5. So I think that probably means I've watched Buffy a lot more than I've watched Angel.
He's the one person in Buffy who knows how to use the word nemesis.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the takeaway from that episode. Hooray.
Yes.
Um, on our first episode, a fortnight ago, we mentioned Andy Umberger, who was in that episode, but he was also in Buffy and Angel. The other ones I can think of are Summer Glau, OVS, Felicia Day, and Nathan Fillion, if we do include Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog.
Of course we include Dr. Horrible Sing Along blog. Why wouldn't we?
You can't not include Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog.
Exactly. And also Carlos Jacat, I think, is another hat trick. He was Lawrence Dobson on Firefly, the Undercover Alliance dude. He was Harry's fiance in an Angel season 1 episode and a demon in Buffy season 3 premiere Anne.
Ah.
And technically, Eliza Dushku does count because she played Faith on both Angel and Buffy before she starred in Dollhouse.
I was considering 3 different roles on 3 different shows.
Yeah, I
'Cause
think that's
otherwise,
I
pushing it a
Alexis
little bit.
Denisov, probably Sarah Michelle Gellar's in one of them somewhere.
No, I think it's 3 different Whedon works, not 3 different Whedon characters. I'm just making that my personal headcanon there. So Eliza Dushku can count because I love her.
And Alexis Denisov then.
Was he in 3
He's
different?
in Dollhouse.
Oh, well, see, I haven't seen Dollhouse.
Okay.
You need to see it. It's a fantastic show.
And probably Amy Acker then,
Amy
if
Acker, yeah,
we count
definitely.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yep.
Yeah, she was in Angel, she was in Dollhouse, she was in Agents of Shield, she was in the Much Ado About Nothing. She's been in a lot of his stuff.
Yep.
Oh God, yeah. If we go movies, we can start bringing in
Well,
Samuel L. Jackson and just
oh,
a slight.
that's true if we start adding Avengers in there.
Yeah, yeah.
So when we talked about the cancellation of Firefly, we said that there were 3 days left in the production when the cast and crew found out that the show was going to be canceled. So the episode being filmed at the time was The Message, and the final scene to film was the return of Tracy's body to his family.
And that absolutely breaks my heart. And it sort of changes the way I feel about that episode. but of course we can talk about that more when we get to the episode itself.
So, we've now finally finished all of Firefly. Mandy, what do you think of the show?
I have lots of feelings about the show. I now understand why it's so popular, and I am definitely among those who wish it had never been canceled because it just had so much potential.
Now, butting in a little bit here, so there's a lot of people that are really dying for Firefly to be like reincarnated, and I feel like that would be a horrible, horrible idea because it sucks
Yeah.
so much that the show is canceled, but at this point, it would not do the show justice to bring it back.
No.
I think it could.
No,
It would only work if they brought back everybody. Like, I mean, it couldn't be a reboot where they tried to do it all over again with new cast and a new sort of new story. It would literally have to pick up from where this ended with the same cast, the same writers, the same directors, and of course that's never going to happen. But I think if they could do that, it could work.
I think the alternative is a really good idea. There, somebody out there on the internet or a production studio, somebody I've gotten wind of is making a Firefly cartoon animated series, and I think that that is probably the best direction that this can go in. You know, there are other things like the comic books and stuff, but short of being able to go back into the past and not cancel the show, I think the animated series would be something really cool to look forward to.
No, it is a really good point. I put my sensible hat on a bit here, I'm afraid. The show was close to cancellation. It was shopped around to other networks, and no one picked it up. The show did get brought back. It had its own movie. It had its own thing that could have been part of a larger trilogy series, a Star Trek, Star Wars type space opera. It did modest returns, maybe just about broke even, but was not a huge rampant success that it might be when you consider how everyone talks about it.
Right, but the movie was kind of rushed, and they put it together to kind of give some closure to the series, and it was just too much, too many storylines to be addressed, too much character building in between. Like you couldn't wrap it up sufficiently in an hour and a half movie, and so
Hmm.
the movie was really disappointing to a lot of people. But again, that's something to talk more about in the future, I think.
Yes, absolutely. For me, we've looked at these in three separate sections, and the first five episodes are a bit thin. They have a lot of story and world building to do, but then you move into the next set that are quite humorous. They're filled with great character moments. And these affect the three that we've just watched are effectively a mix of those two. There's lots of stories, but there's a lot of character relationship development going on. What do you two think about these five?
I wasn't as enamored with these episodes as I was with the middle four, but they are very thought provoking. They definitely add to the world building and character development. They set me up for more, and it hurts my heart that there isn't any more.
Yeah, that was pretty much my sentiments exactly. So the series starts off slow, then it gets really, really, really good. And then it starts like really setting us up for something that never gets delivered. So yeah, it hurts my heart as well. It's really disappointing.
It's really interesting because it feels like it's a decade or so ahead of its time. There's been a number of miniseries recently, shows like You, Me, and the Apocalypse, Ascension, Fortitude, that they've been on over here. Possibly they've been on in the States, and I can't vouch for that. But
I have
there's
no idea. I've never heard of them.
okay, they're each a few series around different stories, a few episodes, sorry, and they introduce lots of characters and lots of things, and have generally been very, very good. There is scope for there to be more after them, but they form a sort of complete whole as they are. And Firefly feels a lot like that to me. When we look at the whole, and particularly the way it ends, and you sort of have, you've got the river arc, her getting back to herself. There could be more, but I'm happy with the set that we get.
I'm not,
You and your
but
optimism.
yeah, I'm definitely not, but I don't want to do like the Fuller House thing where they
Mm,
rebooted it, 10 years later, 20 years later, and then it just kind of sucks compared to what you're used to.
yeah, and even like Arrested Development, they couldn't get back all of the cast at the same time. So they filmed it in such a way that some characters didn't have scenes together because their schedules didn't free them up.
And, Ron Glass, the guy that played Shepherd Book,
Oh
is
yeah.
sadly deceased now, so we'll
Mm,
never have him back.
That hurts my heart.
mm, very sad.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's take a few minutes, and by a few minutes, I probably mean a lot more than that, but let's talk about the individual episodes before we jump into kind of talking about the show as a whole. So let's start with War Stories, which was my favorite of these five. Even though, oh
Oh,
my gosh,
really?
you guys, this episode was so dark. It was hard to watch.
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite episodes, but it's definitely very, very dark. Yeah.
I don't I don't think I'm in a place yet where I can rank my top 5 or 6 episodes. I can tell you which ones they are. I just don't know that I can put them in an order yet. I need to rewatch the whole thing again. But this one was so good. It was so character driven more than story driven, I think. And that's what I like. I want to know more about these characters that I'm falling in love with. And so getting to do that really helps me buy into the story more. And so this was just a great one.
I think this one's my absolute favorite one for the back and forth between Mal and Wash, because it brings their tension between each other kind of to the tipping point and gives you a little bit of the closure that you don't get from so many of the other storylines. And the tactic that Mal was using to keep Wash from breaking is brilliant. I'm going to insult you, but that's going to keep you strong. It's just, I don't know. It's a really good episode, in my opinion.
It is. And I have to say, I didn't understand that's what was happening until after they rescued Wash. And so I honestly, legitimately thought, one, that they were playing it for humor, and two, that they were really legitimately fighting about Zoe. I mean, I was really upset that Zoe and Wash were fighting to start with. And then to have it move into the torture scene, it was hard to watch because you love the characters and the relationships they have with each other. And then all of a sudden, seemingly without warning, although if you rewatch it, I'm sure it builds up a little bit, there's this big conflict that's almost like a love triangle, but it's really not because Wash is just crazy. And and then you find out Mal was, keeping it going and just driving that nail in to take care of his crew. And
Yeah,
it was great.
it's definitely something that was built up to in previous episodes, and I think it was definitely the point of the producers and directors to make it look like they were actually fighting. So towards the end, you could be like, "Oh, that's a relief," and that was actually pretty freaking awesome. What's really funny about this episode is at the very end when Zoe and Mal are like, "Well, we got to do it."
Oh, I loved that scene. I thought it was fantastic. It was so great.
For me, War Stories, I love the idea of it. I don't like what it does to Wash. In some ways, it breaks the character for me, for him to pretty suddenly start having a problem with the way that Zoe and Mal are. I can understand his point for her protecting him, that he doesn't need protecting. And there's a point that he makes to Mel that I really like, where he says to him, how dare you put my wife in that danger? I love her, and she jumps for you, and she's in danger when she's doing that. Those I can get behind. I love the antagonization between them, and I always get the to understand what Mel's doing at the point where Wash starts fainting, and he just screams Wash's name until he wakes up, and infuriates him even more. And it's like, oh, okay, he's doing this for a reason. He's focused on Wash, and that's getting him through. But some of the stuff about the jealousy that they might have slept together, or how he suddenly becomes this brave hero, and even stops quipping when he turns around to Jane and he says, there's a creed amongst people like us, no man left behind. And I'm sat there waiting for him to drop the gun, the ammo to fall out, something, some sort of ironic moment to happen. But it doesn't happen, and it's really strange because it doesn't sit with the character.
Again, it's something that they've been subtly building up to in previous episodes. We've talked extensively about the subtlety of the show, but if you go back in and watch the series again, you'll see, and just here and there, Wash will say something that you're like, oh, this dude's jealous. This guy needs to chill out. He needs, or there needs to be some sort of agreement or something going on. And then it gets to this episode, and that's where the story arcs, and Wash gets that closure.
Yeah, the way he does it is I think probably the most problematic bit, The fact that he sort of breaks the shuttle to make them take him away so that Zoe can't go. If it had been written that Zoe was out of action, so Wash forced himself on that way or something, but kind of breaking the ship and strong
I,
arming them is just.
I actually kind of like that because Wash was standing up and being all alpha male, and then Zoe was like, "All right, fine, go prove yourself." And it was like Zoe knew that it wasn't a great idea, but she was just gonna let him screw up and face the consequences.
I feel like this was a natural progression for his character, in part because, like Sarah said, we have seen, bits and pieces of this little conflict between him and Zoe. But then whenever you get to this scene specifically, I think it's more Wash than anything else because, I mean, what did Zoe think happened? She thought River had been playing in there and that she had messed it up. It's a very childish thing for Wash to have done,
Mm,
which is and what was the first scene that we ever saw with Wash? He was playing with toys, and so I think that's very in character for him to do something like that. Even if the reason behind it is darker and more serious, it didn't break the world for me. It didn't break the character for me.
absolutely. I do. That's my problem with it. There is no way
It
to.
breaks the character for you.
Yeah, it's too much of a step for him. And part of it is, I think I've said before, Wash isn't an interesting character particularly. He's there for one purpose, and that's to kind of be comic relief and fly the ship. That's two purposes.
Aw.
He's there for two
Well, you
purposes.
have to have a genius pilot in any space drama,
Oh yeah, of course you do.
and
They're
that's
poor.
who.
They don't make any money, but they've got this amazing pilot, an amazing engineer.
Do you think you would like him better if he wasn't married to Zoe?
I don't. I think that awkward pairing is part of what I like about his character and part of what I like about the show.
Yeah, I think so too. I just they never gave him anything to do, and then this is part of the problem with it being 14 episodes.
Right.
There hasn't particularly been a Wash episode.
No, but I think he's gotten loads more to do since the first 5 episodes. But I mean, I know I talked about that last week, so
Mm.
you already know that I love Wash, so we won't go into that again.
I had a question on more stories. The part of the setup at the beginning is Inara having a counselor on board, and the shocking, shocking reveal that it's a woman. Oh my gosh, it's a woman. Oh my gosh. What's the point of the counselor? What does she do?
I'm not sure that she actually had anything to do with moving the plot forward, at least that I can see. But I love that she's there. I love that this little B plot with Inara normalizes Inara having a sexual encounter with a woman. I think that's just fantastic. It's moving forward this whole sex positive, positive sex worker story that Joss has been weaving into all of these episodes. And it's just fantastic, especially whenever you consider that on Buffy, there was a lesbian relationship with Willow and Tara, and they had only just had their first on screen kiss the year before. And so we've gone from having all of these, little metaphors not showing a female female relationship in action on a TV screen, instead, kind of doing innuendos with the camera and things like that, to a year later in one of Joss's properties, just completely normalizing it, making it positive. And for that, I love it. I don't care that it doesn't have anything to do with the story.
Fair enough.
That's one thing I absolutely adore about Joss Whedon is the fact that he does write very strong female characters, and he doesn't write them in a way that they're obnoxious or out of the ordinary. He writes them in a way that you would see them out in the world. And so it, like you said, it kind of normalizes the same-sex relationship or this positive sex worker, but it's a reoccurring theme in almost everything he's done. And there's a very famous clip from, I guess it was a Comic-Con or something, where he's talking about how people always ask him, why do you write strong female characters? Why do you write strong female characters? And his answer blows my mind. He says, because you're still asking me that. And I'm getting tingles just thinking about the clip. Joss is just an amazing, amazing director and writer and everything else. And this is something I respect throughout his entire portfolio.
I do agree with that, but I also want to point out that there are times where his treatment of women is problematic. And I don't want to go into specifics because it's not Firefly, but he's not always this awesome, amazing feminist guy, even though he's great. And I love that he writes these strong female characters because he's trying to prove that, female characters are strong, just like male characters are strong. But he can be problematic sometimes. And I just want to point that out because if I don't, somebody will in the comments or on Twitter. So,
Fair enough.
Yeah, very good point. I too really like the character of the counselor. What I particularly love is showing Inara's capability when the counselor says to her, you can drop the act with me. And she says, "Oh, it's so lovely, yes, when I have a woman, so I can drop the act and I can just be myself." I don't believe it for a second. It's still her being professional. She's there to do a job, so she gives the woman what she wants.
Oh,
oh, absolutely.
absolutely.
Really like that.
Let's go back and talk about Shepherd Book for a minute because there was a scene in the beginning that I loved. I absolutely loved, or I guess it was two scenes that were really juxtaposed between each other. Book is talking about Shan Yu, and the bad guy whose name I cannot remember right this minute was also talking about Shan Yu. And it was setting up something for Book's storyline, I think. And we were meant to draw that parallel between the shepherd and this obvious villain, but ultimately it doesn't deliver because 14 episodes and the show gets canceled, so we don't get to see it. But I liked the idea that was planted, the seed that was planted, that Shepherd is so much more complicated and complex and deep than we can imagine.
So, Book's story in particular is the one thing that I wish had been actually had finished up because it's so intriguing for these characters to make these little quips about Book, and you're like, there's something else there. He's supposed to be a shepherd, but what did he do back in the day? And this never comes to a conclusion, and it drives me crazy because it could have been an amazing story. However, from what I've heard, one of the Serenity graphic novels goes into that story, but I haven't read it, so I can't really vouch for it.
It does. It's called Serenity, A Shepherd's Tale, and it apparently reveals that his real name is Henry Evans, and it also gives his backstory. I haven't read it, but I'm definitely going to go buy it because
Me
I
too.
need to know. I need to know.
Yeah, I'm not even a big fan of graphic novels, but this is something that's bugged me for a long time, ever since I've started watching Firefly. And I keep telling myself, I'm going to go read it, I'm going to go read it. But now that we've really delved into this topic more for the last few weeks, I have to go read it. So I'm probably going to go out and buy it today and read it, find out what's going on.
And I know you guys are going to ask me about Jane like you always do. So the only thing I'm going to say about him in this episode is that Jane is disgusting.
But
That's
you
all.
think he's disgusting in every episode.
I'll be in my bunk. I'm sorry. Disgusting.
Now,
Jane,
you
grab your
talk
weapon.
about positive sexuality, and he's just doing the same thing, but from a man's perspective.
No, no. That's giving him a free pass for being
No, no, gender flip it,
For
and we don't have a problem with it.
I think it's fine. I think he's hilarious in every episode. So that's somewhere that or something that you and I differ greatly on.
yeah. He is funny sometimes, but I hate him. But we should talk more about Jane in later
Yeah.
episodes, I think. Hey, guess what, you guys? Badass River finally showed up.
Both seconds of it.
Yeah.
Yes, and then we never see her again. But I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew that there's something that the government did to her brain that turned her into a badass, and we finally got to see a little bit of it here because there is no power in the verse that can stop her.
Yeah, but it's so out of nowhere that it freaks everybody out on the ship. And that's kind of sad.
Well, I mean, at this point, it only freaks out Kaylee because nobody else knows about it
Oh
until we
no.
get to objects in space.
Oh, that's true. That is farther along. But it's something that another regret I have about the series ending is that would have been something else that would have been really fascinating to watch is how she gets from, I can kill you with my brain and, firing bullets without looking at the people to the river that we see in Serenity, the movie. But again,
Which I don't remember.
Which
So,
we're not going to mention.
yeah, let's not talk about that yet. All I can say is that all I remember is the feeling that I have about River from the movie, which you guys know I've been talking about it this whole time, is that I feel like River's supposed to be a badass. And that's all I know, and it's just a feeling. I don't know what the plot is or the story is or what she's really like in the movie. But I'm hoping that this side of her is explored a little more in the movie. And eventually we'll talk about that, I
Yeah,
think.
I don't remember a whole lot about the movie because I wasn't super impressed with it, so I've only seen it once. And I kind of have the same like feeling about River. I remember the scene that gave me that feeling, but that's about all I remember from the movie. That and another traumatic event that I'm not going to speak about
Yeah,
yet.
no. For me, the actually it's Kaylee in that scene that I love even more. The fact that she can't shoot these guys, she balks at the idea of shooting anyone. Mal even says later he has no problem with that being the case. And then her reaction
Oh
to River
yeah.
doing it as well. She thought River and she were on a level, and now her worldview is completely changed.
Right, because this is the same episode where we see River and Kaylee playing together, right? Chasing each
Yeah,
other with the apple.
yeah. If you're talking about juxtaposition, that's terrific.
Yes. I mean, because the episode starts with those two acting like children,
Mm.
very innocent, very playful, and just having fun. And you could never imagine a gun in either of their hands. And then you get to this scene, and Kaylee follows through on that because she's still the woman, really. I mean, she is a woman, let's just say that. But I think of her as a girl because of how she portrays the character most of the time. But she follows through with that thread, and then you get River who just walks up, shoots him, and then acts like nothing ever happened. And it blows my mind a little bit, but I really liked it.
Yeah, it's a nice sort of arrival to the next stage in River, which is why for me this is a very good way to start off this final section. So, shall we move on to Trash?
Sure.
Sees the return of Saffron, Christina Hendricks.
So the only thing I actually liked about this episode was the final scene with Simon and Jane. The rest of it I didn't dislike. It just was just okay.
But we got to see Nathan Fillion's butt. I think that
Woo!
you all know that that's like a thrilling experience for me because Nathan Fillion, if you ever listen to this, give me a shout out on Twitter, or I'm sure you can email Mandy and get my phone number. I'll be waiting for your call. But
Well, I do have to say, after we see the scene where she leaves him naked and he's throwing the temper tantrum with his little tushy just kind of shaking in the wind, I immediately went and Googled to find a GIF of this. And
Jeff.
I did, and I posted it all over Twitter. It was wonderful. But I also learned to be very specific in what you're Googling for and don't just Google mouth naked tush. Don't do it, you guys. Just don't do it.
Bless you using the word tush.
that is, yeah.
I mean, you can't really call it anything else with the way that he's just like throwing that little temper tantrum. It's fantastic.
I saw a great appearance with him once where someone asked him about tattoos, and he said, "Oh, I have one. It's in a very private place, so you only get to see it if you get really close to me." And someone nearby him said, "Or you've seen that episode of Firefly." And he got really sheepish. He was like, oh yeah, everyone's seen that
Oh
bit of me, haven't
yeah,
they?"
that was the thing that I did.
Yeah, it was great.
Something else I liked about this episode is that we got to get a little bit more into Saffron. You're not ever sure who she is, but Mal starts realizing that this guy that they're trying to steal the gun from might actually be somebody that means something to her. And that's not something we've seen from Saffron before.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that when she was with Mal, after they had pulled off the heist, and she's crying and he's trying to call her out on being her genuine self for a few minutes, I honestly believe that she is being authentic there. I just think that it's so ingrained in her to be a con woman that she has to take advantage of the situation anyway, which is how she gets the gun from Mal. But I don't think she was playing him with her emotions there. I actually do think that she was displaying a little bit of her true self there, but we'll never know because we never see her again.
Yeah.
I like it well enough. It's not a bad heist episode. The twist at the end with Anara is very nicely done because they don't hint at it at all. But it's also slightly odd.
Can I say something real quick about that twist at the end about Inara?
Hmm.
Not really having anything to do with the scene, except for what she was wearing on her face drove me crazy the whole time.
The weird veil thing.
That veil, like, you're talking, like, move it out of your face. I mean, if there's a religious reason that you're wearing something like that, that's fine. And I really try hard not to judge other people about the things that they wear, but that just got on my nerves the entire scene.
I think we see something similar in Out of Gas when she comes aboard to view the ship and barter for taking it. Memory set
Oh
tells me
yeah,
she's wearing a strange
yeah,
veil at that point as well.
you're right.
I think Saffron would definitely have been a recurring character. They put a lot of effort into building up her character and some of the relationships, and then they don't kill her at the end. She just gets taken away.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's exactly where they're headed with her. Again, that's something that we'll never know because of the cancellation. Thanks, Fox.
Phew, she got to go be on Mad Men. Hooray!
Yeah, that's true though. I mean, if Firefly had continued, Christina Hendricks may never have been on Mad Men.
Yeah, but I'm pretty fabulous for going off on tangents when you mention stuff like this. I started watching Mad Men after you were talking about it, and I cannot handle it. I've only made it about halfway through the first season,
Mm.
and I know it's supposed to be set back in the day, in what, like the 50s or something,
Yeah.
or 60s, I think. I can't
Hmm.
remember. But the way that they talk about and treat women on that show just drives me absolutely crazy. And maybe I just need to get farther into it, but that's a discussion for another day, I think. But yeah, I just had to say something about that. I
Yeah.
still love Christina Hendricks, but Mad Men is just not my
Yeah.
thing.
As a show, you're absolutely right. It is horrendous. And my dad, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. So I told my parents to watch it. My dad can't watch it. It just drives him too nuts, just how bad it is. My mum loves it though. Go figure.
That's amazing. I would think it would be the opposite for most people, but yeah, I can't. I
Oh,
want
my
to
boss.
punch all the guys.
Yeah, my boss absolutely loves it. She has tried to get me to watch it several times, and Matthew is trying to get me to watch it, and about half of the oddwonks on Twitter are now trying to get me to watch it. So I think I'm gonna have to try to watch it at some point. But my boss talks about it a lot, even after it's been canceled. So
Knowing what I know about you, Mandy, I don't think you will appreciate it. Just like I don't like if it's bad enough that I get upset at the treatment of women in particular, like in a fantasy show setting, I really think that it's gonna be kind of a hard thing for you to watch. But I mean, try it out. I could be completely wrong.
I'll give it a shot. But we need to keep talking about Firefly. So next up is The Message. And I think I have a pretty unpopular opinion on this one. I don't like it.
At all? Even a little bit?
No, no. Um, Learning what I learned today, or I guess really last night talking to you, that this was the final episode that was shot after they found out it was canceled. I feel a little more sentimental about it just because it's sad and it's sadder knowing that this very sad and somber scene is the last thing they ever filmed together. But from a story perspective, I hate this episode because if Mal had only shared his plan, there would have been absolutely no conflict. Tracy wouldn't have died, and there would have been no story.
Exactly, there would have been no story. But Tracy kind of digged his own grave before Mal and Zoe ever got involved. So it's really hard for me to feel any sympathy for him, despite the fact that he was doing it for his family. Going back to whether or not we like this episode, there's that scene with Jane and his hat, and it's a famous scene, and now everybody owns the hat, and it's perfect. But yeah, we can talk more about Tracy now. I just wanted to throw that in there.
I do appreciate that Jane's hat has become very famous despite only ever being in this episode. So,
Well, if a man walks down the street in that hat, you know he's not scared of anything.
fair enough. But going back to Tracy,
I like the comparison between Tracy and Simon across multiple episodes as well. Obviously, we have the direct thing with the way they treat Kaylee and the way Kaylee looks at them. But there's also the point that you're making that he doesn't trust Mal. He thinks Mal's turning him over, even though everyone's telling him to put the gun down and be calm, which we saw with Simon much, much earlier in the series.
You know, speaking
right?
of Kaylee in this episode, I really like the fact that she was showing interest in somebody else, because she and Simon have been dancing around a potential romantic relationship for a while now. And it's like every time they start to take a step forward, then they go and take two steps back. And so for her to have another even smidge of romantic interest makes me feel like she's more of a real person than just a character on a TV show.
Well, that's mostly just because Simon's an idiot who says things like, well, you're the only woman on the ship who I could possibly be with.
Yeah, but the
I
fact
mean,
that the director, the producers of the show didn't just make her character one dimensional. Like, she had a crush on Simon, and that was like the path that she was going to be on for the whole series. The fact that she was capable of liking somebody else, you don't see that too much in shows like this. Like, once a character likes somebody, they try and progress with that storyline. And even though this wasn't, they didn't divest for too long from that, the fact that she showed interest in somebody else is really, I don't know, it builds part of her character for me.
I can see that, but I feel like it's not quite that simple just because he died. It's not going to last beyond this single episode. And so it's really not something that is groundbreaking, I think, because in the very next episode, she's just going to be flirting with Simon again. They give her a break, yes, but it's only for this one single story.
Exactly, but you don't know where the story could have gone if the guy hadn't died. And that's what I think is so spectacular about the fact that they let her show interest in somebody else. Yeah, the guy died, and then she goes back to just being interested in Simon. But there's always that little bit of like, what if Tracy hadn't had died, would she have forgotten about Simon and moved on with Tracy, or would it have turned into this big who do I want type storyline? Or there's just so many unanswered questions there, and like I said, it just rounds out the character for me a little bit more.
Yeah, is there something to it that Simon says to her, "You're the only one here who's not married or my sister"? Arguably, he's the only one there that she could be interested in. Maybe the captain, but we're already trying to set up something else with Mal. Has got his own stories about women going on, and that would, that's the fourth season when they're trying to come up with new plot lines, doing something unusual like that. So it is another guy comes on board, and hey, she can be interested in him.
It also shows that she's not, completely set on this relationship that just doesn't seem to be, working out the way that she wants it to. Like, she has the respect for herself to explore other options.
I don't have much else to say about this episode because despite all of the good things that you guys are talking about relationship wise, I still can't get past the idea that Tracy died for no good reason.
He didn't trust Mal. If he trusted Mal, he would have been alive now.
Had I been in that position, I wouldn't have trusted Mal either. All he heard was, we're going to call them and let them come. And with that same information, I would have been just as upset as Tracy was. I don't know that I would have, grabbed a gun and held Kaylee hostage and all of that stuff, but I would have felt the same way. And in the end, Mal's the one who killed him. And there's no consequence for that. There's no guilt for that. It's shown as completely normal and completely okay. And I'm not okay with it. I think this was a terrible story and it shouldn't have happened.
I think Mal just kind of expects the people that he's working with, his crew, and I guess Tracy was kind of crew at that point, just for this little smidge of time. I think Mal expects them to trust him because he's the captain and he's not done them wrong really yet. Like, everything that he does has been kind of thought out and planned to make sure that it's a good outcome. So I think the fact that Tracy didn't trust him was kind of a curveball thrown in there as well.
I don't think that's fair because Tracy hasn't seen these people in 6, 7 years at this point. They don't know each other anymore. And yeah,
Yeah, but
putting myself
they're
in
war
Tracy's shoes,
buddies.
it doesn't matter. It's been almost a decade. They don't know each other anymore. And I wouldn't trust Mal either if I had been in his shoes. If all I had heard was, yeah, we're going to call these people who are trying to kill you and tell them you're here, I'd be freaking out too.
Yeah, but there's that thing again with the trust. I think Mal just kind of assumed that because they fought together in the war, they were on the same side. They were semi close in the war. That Tracy would just automatically trust him, and that's also kind of a blow to Mal at that point, in my opinion.
From Tracy's perspective, though, he thinks this guy was my leader when we were in war together, and he did everything he could to try and save me, and here he is today throwing me to the wolves. If Mal had just told him what the plan was, none of this would have happened. And everybody would have lived happily ever after. And Mal wouldn't have killed him. And I, I can't get past it. I'm sorry.
What do you guys think the reason was that Mal didn't share the plan? Like, in my opinion, I feel like he wanted the people's reactions to be authentic. But I'd like to hear, especially your opinion, Mandy, on why he might not have shared the plan with Tracy.
Honestly, I don't know because to me, I read the situation as if he did share the plan with his actual crew, just not with Tracy. And honestly, I think it's just poor writing for the show. I think it's false conflict, and I just don't like it.
When they come up with the plan, Tracy overhears the very last bit of it to call the cops, and they don't know that Tracy's there, to be fair. And he then grabs a gun, starts shooting at people, takes Kaylee hostage. There's not a huge amount of time there to do that. And then, as he's got the gun, as he's waving it around, Book says to him, "Put that thing down, boy. You have no idea." He tries to do exactly the same thing that he did to Simon earlier in the series. Simon trusted the captain, and they all got away safe. Tracy doesn't have that trust, so he ends up shot.
All right.
Yeah, my mind is not going to change on this, and I can't get past it. So we're just going to have to go with that.
Shall we do Heart of Gold?
Yes. Hey, guess what? I don't really like this episode either.
Honestly, I think that this episode is probably one of the most disliked ones of the series.
It's entirely emotional for me, though, for why I don't like it. Because the plot is good, the potential of the plot is good. The reason I don't really like it is because Mal sleeps with Nandy when my OTP is totally Mal and Inara. And then Inara's reaction is that she has to leave. And so when you put those two things together, it breaks the world in the way that I want it to be. And that's why I don't like this episode. If you take those two things out, the rest of the episode is fine. I like, the fighting and what they're doing. I like that Mal decided to go and help these people who he really didn't need to help. And you know that he's doing it for Inara. But he's choosing to put himself and his crew in harm's way to help these strangers. And I like that. But I just don't like what it does to me emotionally.
I think Mal sleeping with Nandy was fine. It didn't bother me really in the least bit because, like, with that story arc with Kaylee and Tracy, Mal and Inara aren't a thing. Like, we all want them to be. They have expressed emotion for each other, but they're not getting to that point. And I think it's natural for a man to, if he's not getting anywhere with the woman that he is interested in initially, when another woman comes up that is also interesting to him, I think it's natural for him to want to go and be comforted. And the fact that he didn't treat her like a sex worker, he treated her as somebody that he was interested in. I don't know. I liked it.
I don't have a problem with the actual thing that Mal and Nandy did. And in fact, I loved Inara's response. She said, I don't have my doc open, but she said something like, if you don't have a puritanical view of sex, then there's nothing to be embarrassed by. And I think that's fantastic. That's great. It's the emotional aspect for me because to me, I want Mal and Inara together. And so to see him with someone else feels like a betrayal of that. And that's why I don't like it. And I know that's totally my own personal hang up, but that's where I am.
I think Nandy is a better fit for Mal.
Definitely. I agree wholeheartedly with that.
They're more equal. There's no huge subtext between them. Everything that goes on with Inara is one of them trying to have the upper hand and playing games against each other. And it's a TV trope, but it's really dull and it's not done particularly well because, as we've said as we've gone through, it's just frustrating.
It is frustrating, but when you consider extra textual evidence that in the story, had it not been canceled, we would have found out that Inara was dying. I think that gives it elevates the story. You begin to see why Inara is so coy. You know, why she has these feelings but she can't act on them, and so she gets quippy and sarcastic and sassy, and because she's not reaching out to Mal, Mal has to react the same way. And without that extra textual evidence, it is super frustrating and it's, a little annoying to watch, but it's also what you expect from a television show because you can't have your leads be happily ever after in the first 14 episodes.
That's true. So why don't we move on to objects in space?
Oh, this episode. I have so many mixed feelings about this episode, you guys.
This is my favorite episode.
Really?
Really?
When I look at
Huh.
this as it's 14 episodes, we have some kind of arc in there about this young girl who is lost, damaged, broken, however, we sum her up. And over the course of the series, they're able to research her, analyze her, help her come back to herself. And this is the episode where we're addressing it directly. We actually have our characters sitting down and having a conversation, which is very rare in network television when you look at a show like Lost, when no one talks to each other, and that's how you keep the plot moving forward. In this episode, they're actually talking about it, and I get frustrated that Mel won't make a decision. He says, "Let's go and sleep on it." When this is the worst point in that conversation to go and sleep, it's the time to have everything out and discuss what the options might be.
Well, I think they did discuss what the options were. The options are we either keep her on the ship and just keep dealing with this craziness and the potential danger, or we make her leave the ship. I mean, those are really the only two options that he has at this point. And so I can completely understand not wanting to make that decision rashly because he certainly doesn't want to give her back to the Alliance, but he's also worried about the safety of everybody on a ship.
They say the options, they don't discuss them. They don't talk about what it means for all the parties involved, how they do it, what they do.
The fact that River overhears them talking about it, and she kind of starts having these "I'm not worthy" feelings, or maybe they don't want me after all feelings. But then at the end, when she realizes that Mal really does have her back, I think that was a really endearing moment for me.
So where she talks to Early about going with him, you think that's true? She's actually believing she's going to go?
I think she was starting to question Mal and the crew's loyalty to her and her own like worthiness to the crew. I I, I think she might have started to question, am I causing more harm than good? Would it should I just go with Early to make their lives better? But then and again in the end everything worked out.
I think that if Mal hadn't defeated early, she would have gone with him.
Okay. I
Do you read
read
it differently?
all of this completely differently. She gets Kaylee to get Mal out because Mal is awake, so that he can get a suit, so that when she lures Early outside, he can then defeat him. When Simon attacks Early, she's annoyed and worried for Simon because she knows she's not going anywhere. She just wants him to stay put and everything will be fine. She's got this covered, bro, sit down. She's not saying she's going away. She is luring him.
I didn't see it like that, but maybe if I go back and rewatch the episode and think about it in more that way, then maybe I could see it better.
I can maybe I can see it both ways. I think there's a timing issue there because I remember wondering how did Mal have time to put that suit on? Because the last scene we saw was Early trying to get out of the ship in his suit and Mal fighting him, and Early hits him back against the stairs again before he goes out. And then almost immediately Mal's out there with the suit on.
No, that's
And
Simon.
so, no, that was Mal.
No, that's Simon. Simon then comes. Simon, despite being shot, comes back at him again, and then River has a nice chat with Simon whilst Early's coming out because we see Mel in the bit where the power goes down and it's all flickering and he's all scared of River taking over the ship. We see Mal in the background sneaking off to the hatch.
I remember seeing him in the background, but I also have a and apparently I'm wrong, but I do have a memory of while Early is going out of the hatch, Mal fights him but maybe it is Simon. But I remember thinking, how did Mal get the suit on that quick? Because I was remembering him being the one that he was just fighting. But on the other hand, Mal does apologize to River for Simon messing up her plan. So maybe you're right. But I did totally read it as if she had planned to go with him.
I guess it's worth rewatching the episode now to really look at it from both points of view. But yeah, Mandy, I read it the same way that you did, pretty much.
Just because, I mean, they did a really good job of setting up River's emotions from the beginning because as she's walking through watching everybody talk and she's projecting on them what she thinks they're feeling, like Simon saying, I'd still be there right now if it weren't for you, and things like that. Simon didn't actually say that, but she heard it. And we got scenes like that with all of the crew, and then she overhears them actually talking about her and whether or not she should stay on the ship or not. And so all of that primed her to be ready to make life easier for them. And so that's why I read it that way.
Yeah.
But Simon does say it out loud a couple of episodes before. He's telling Kaylee stories about getting arrested and singing and drunken shenanigans at the hospital. In fact, no, it is that episode, isn't it?
No,
That's the
that's this
episode.
scene. Yeah, that is
Yeah,
the scene. He doesn't actually say it. She imagines it.
I'm just grabbing the script because I'm sure there's a line where he starts and you just know he's about to make it textual.
Because I actually rewound this scene and watched it over again because the camera, the way they shot it was confusing to me at first, and I didn't understand. Was she reading his mind? Was this something he actually said? And so then I rewatched how they shot it, and it seemed clear to me that she was projecting.
The thing that Jane says about, I got stupid, the money was too good, is exactly what he says to Mel, which is a really
Right.
nice
His
shadow.
was the only one. His was the only one, I think, where he actually said word for word something that we've heard him say before. It stuck out to me for that reason. And so it made me wonder, and actually, because this is also the episode where they start talking about her being a reader, so it made me wonder if this was just setting up that conversation where she is actually reading their minds, which is possible, but
I've got it now. He doesn't say it at that point in the scene. He says it later on. He makes a comment. She asks him about his feeling of home because River loves the ship, and he says, "I would be there right now if she hadn't, if they had just left her alone."
so was she seeing what he was going to say in the future? Is that what we're saying this is happening here?
I still think that it was her projecting what she was thinking they would say. And she knew that he had said stuff like that in the past. So that's probably what she was thinking he still felt towards her, which, it essentially is what he still felt towards her. But she was starting to have these doubts and these self esteem issues regarding the entire crew. And so when she looked at him, she, assumed that he still felt that way.
Yeah, you guys have both watched Buffy, right?
Hmm.
Of course.
So I viewed these scenes the way that in the season 5 episode of Buffy called The Body, in the scene where the doctor is telling Buffy how her mom died and that it was painless, there's a shot from Buffy's POV of the doctor speaking, and all of a sudden, the words that she's hearing the doctor say don't match the words that he's actually saying. So, like, his lips don't match what she's hearing. And so she's projecting what she thinks he's actually thinking or what she thinks he should be saying, which is, of course, I have to lie to you, blah, blah, blah. And so that's how I was reading all of these episodes or all of these scenes with River, that she's watching them have this actual conversation, but she's seeing what she expects to hear.
Yes.
Okay. The thing I love with these scenes is as she's going around and she's touching the ship all the way that she goes, and we focus on her bare foot, her bare feet all the way that she steps around. She's being so tactile with everything. And then it's a beautiful shot at the end with her bending 90 degrees at the waist to look at the stick, and you see all the leaves around her. And she picks it up and she says, it doesn't mean what you think it means. She's imbuing the object with this completely separate meaning from what it actually is.
Which she was, since it wasn't actually a stick.
Hmm. And then all the way through, you have this sense with her of not quite treating the world in the same way. When she stood on the rail, listening to them from beneath. And again, it's a terrific shot because she's way over to the side of the shot, and that you've got most of the cargo bay in it. But you've just got her doing this one thing up in the corner, and that's lovely. And then the introduction of Early, which just takes the whole concept to another level, because he also imbues objects in space with this different meaning. He talks about the gun, and does the gun have purpose if I don't have a plan? Does the room have purpose if I don't have a plan? And he walks around, he's always touching the ship, listening, looking around corners. He licks a pole at one point. His whole movement echoes what River's been doing as well.
Except Early is creepy and River is not.
Yeah, you talk about Jane being disgusting, but early is disgusting to me. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of why I think that, but just kind of like River, he doesn't have much of a filter. Like he just says what's on his mind. And so that also kind of draws that parallel between the two of them.
The short intercut shots when she's really getting into his head really show that there's a level of psychosis going on there, and something going on with this character that we've not quite seen. I think he mentions earlier about how can you be a surgeon if you've not had to do surgery on yourself or felt the pain someone in surgery feels. He compares it to getting psychoanalyzed, and just that reference earlier starts putting in my head the idea of, oh, this is someone who has experience with being psychoanalyzed or understanding deeper psychology of people.
Okay.
Okay.
I just I don't have a lot to say about Early other than he's creepy.
He
Because any deeper conversation of him is not a conversation I think that we should really have on the podcast because he's creepy.
he is very creepy, and he's well written to do that and be so unsettling.
That you're right. That character is incredibly well written, especially for the fact that he only is in that one episode.
Mm.
I found myself wondering how the actor felt playing that role just because it was so hard to watch. I can't imagine how hard it was to be that.
Yeah, you wonder if they kept him apart from the rest of the crew on breaks and things, like they did with the guy who played the alien in Alien, so no one got too comfortable being around him.
Right.
Hmm.
I've also wondered what the like conversation behind the scenes with the creators of the show was like when they were discussing Early's behavior and all the kind of creepy stuff that he does and says. Again, that's for another time and place, I think, but yeah, it's just
Yeah,
I would say it was probably take Hannibal Lecter, remove the cannibalism, dial him up to 11.
it's pure Joss Whedon though. He knows how to write short dialogue that really cuts and stands out.
yes, he does.
Yeah, this is a character who is not going to be forgotten over the run, and it's rare, I think, that there was a character in just one single episode that I could say that about.
Yeah,
I mean, Saffron would have been one even if she had never come back, Saffron would have been one. But I can't think of any other guest star in these 14 episodes that I will remember, that I do remember the way I do these two.
And as much as I really, really, really despise Early, I hate him so much. I'm actually, I'd be interested to see more of a like backstory for him to see, what created him, what events in his life turned him into what he is in this episode. But like much of the things we discussed in Firefly, it's probably not anything that's ever gonna happen.
and for me, it's arguably one of the reasons that Firefly wasn't as successful as it could have been. There's no villain. There's no one you can get behind on that side of things. Every great show has a race, a group, a person, something that you can say, oh yeah, we can see the conflict there, but the other side of it is really interesting.
But I think Firefly would have.
When we look at the other episodes and you have Niska and Badger and Rance, what's the name of the chap in Heart of Gold? They're all just evil for the sake of being evil. They treat women badly, they lie, they're deceitful, they're pompous, and there's nothing particularly there to get behind. You compare them to season 1 of Buffy, The Master. You compare them to Wolfram and Hart.
Right, but if you look at Buffy and you look at Angel, the first X number, the first 10 episodes are very, very episodic. They're not serialized. You don't get Wolfram and Hart as the big bad until really the end of season 2 going into season 3 of Angel. The first season of Angel is very, very episodic. You get a monster of the week. There's not really a big bad that we can see. The same thing with Buffy. Yes, the master is there and he's kind of woven in and out in small pieces, but you don't really get the master as the villain until that season finale. And so I think with Firefly being so young, with only 14 episodes, we were still in that beginning episodic stage. It takes a show a little while to become serialized. And Joss had a 7 season plan for Firefly. And so I'm pretty sure we were going to get that. We just weren't there yet. And so by having it canceled, we ended up robbed of that experience.
And perhaps if they had done it, we would have had more of a show. Perhaps
Maybe,
that's
but
the
I
thing.
think it's really hard. I think it's really hard to serialize a show from the beginning. I'm trying to think of an example where that's been done successfully, and I can't, but that may be because I just put myself on the spot to do that.
I can think of like Supernatural. Everybody was so obsessed with Supernatural, and I just recently started watching it, and I had a really hard time getting through the first season, and it's specifically for this issue. I didn't know the characters, things were weird. I wasn't comfortable with the universe that they're in. But the farther along you get in the series, the better it gets because you get to know the characters better. You understand the universe that they're in. You understand their motivations more. And I think, like we said, I think that Firefly was robbed of this because it only had that one season.
Well, half a season, I would assume. But I think that what episodic television does is it introduces you to the world and the characters and gives you the opportunity to relate to the characters and to fall in love with the characters before they get thrown into this serial arc. You need to care about them before you get that arc, I think. And this is totally just my personal opinion and
No, no,
personal
I'm with you on
experience.
this.
But I think that's what was happening here, and so we didn't get to see it through. But it was successful in making me fall in love with the characters.
Yeah, I feel like it's been done better elsewhere, and it's probably a missed opportunity in Firefly. And in mentioning Buffy, reminds me that, of course, we've got more Firefly than we do first season of Buffy. And the Master was a good enough character that they did weave him in and they did bring him into several episodes. Sometimes not where he should have been, and sometimes just for the sake of it. But he was a very memorable villain that pulled through each thread of the series.
Yeah, I remember watching the first season of Buffy, and at the end of the season finale, I was like, well, crap, where are they going to go with this now? The Master's dead, like the big bad is dead. Yeah, so I think Buffy did it a little better than Firefly.
I would be interested to know what the big bad was supposed to be. I'm assuming it's the Reavers, but I don't know that for sure. Although I suppose it could be the Alliance.
Probably for season one, I think it was the Hands of Blue.
And the Alliance, I think. But yeah, the Hands of Blue, I think actually all three, the Reavers and the Hands of Blue and the Alliance. The Reavers, I feel like they were going to build up to them being a bigger bad farther in the series.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
like everything
I think they
else,
were season two. Yeah.
So I don't know that I would consider the Alliance and the Hands of Blue to be two separate things.
No.
I think those are the same to me.
you don't
And
think
to
so, even
River.
though the Hands of Blue were killing anybody that spoke to River at the Alliance?
Yeah, because to me, it's the Alliance that did this to her. It was specifically the Hands in Blue that did it because, they're the ones who wielded the scalpel, but it was in the name of the Alliance. And so to me, they're the same.
I think it's like comparing the CIA to the government as a whole. Like the Hands of Blue maybe were just like a small faction of the Alliance, but the Alliance didn't really, they weren't necessarily the driving force behind it.
Fair enough.
But I think this is, for me, it's a really good finale. I mentioned on a previous episode that Strangely Literal on the Discord chat server had given us her favorite episodes, and this was her favorite as well. In discussing it, it was very much that thing of this brings us full arc of now we can see River has some capability, she has some usefulness because no one else was able to take out Jubal early. And then at the very end of it, that moment where she and Mal share a little bit of banter, and she says permission to come aboard. That's her being compass mentis enough to actually become part of this found family. So I do like it as an arc of her being locked in a box through to actually wanting to come and join them on this ship that she now feels is home.
I don't disagree with you, but I think I need to watch the whole run a couple more times before I can kind of come over to that side of the fence. Right now, I'm still stuck in this place of I've only seen it once and I need to take a shower after watching it because Jubal Early is just so awful and I
It's
can't get
disgusting.
past
Yep.
I can't get past his psychopathy. Is that how you say that word?
Yes.
Cool. I can't get past that to see River's arc. I love that River was clever. And I will say, if you look through my notes that I link to in the show notes, you'll see for a split second, I actually wondered, did River somehow have the power to become part of the ship? Or was she just really insanely clever and she's trying to play him? I didn't know. And so I love, love, love that we get Clever River. And I love that her and Mal come to an understanding at the end. But I can't get past the villain yet. And so I think I need to watch the whole arc from Serenity of the Pilot all the way through Objects in Space at least once, if not more, to fully appreciate how everything comes to be and how everything wraps up. And I know that Objects in Space was never intended to be a series finale. It wasn't even the last one they filmed. It does wrap up River's arc nicely, I
Hmm.
think, because she does go from this crazy outsider to being part of the crew.
Hmm.
But there's just all this other stuff going on that I can't get past from my first watching.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
I think all three of us would probably benefit from a rewatch now since we've had all of these conversations about it to kind of go back and look at it from all of our different points of view.
So, I think we've got some questions that we can speak about in general. Covered a few of them, so I'm going to skip around our notes a little bit. Jane, we've touched on.
Not enough.
We want to touch Jane more. Um, I, I think Jane does have quite a nice arc, but perhaps not done as well as it could be. What are your thoughts?
I don't think Jane changed at all. I wanted him to change after Ariel, and it seemed like he was going to briefly, but I don't think he changed at all.
Yeah, I think that's something that, again, they were probably going to work towards more in further seasons. But yeah, it did seem like at that one point he was going to start turning around and then he just kind of stopped and turned back into his normal self. But I love him anyway. He's an asshole, but I love him.
Yeah, I mean, because even in Objects in Space, when Mal is fussing at Jane because River got his gun, his first instinct is to be like, well, she's crazy and she shouldn't be on the ship anyway.
Oh, in his defense, she is crazy. But yeah.
He's plain spoken, is one way to put it. I think there is an arc. He goes through that thing on Ariel, and he gets scared witless that he might be thrown out of the ship while it's in space. And then we see him, like you say, he's buying apples. He does give his money back into helping Mal and Wash be recovered from Niska. He does take his weapon to go and help save them.
Right, but all of that happens in the episode after Ariel.
Yep,
And so you see a little bit of change.
yep, yep. When you then get into Heart of Gold, he's slightly awful because he's only going to these women for one thing, but also they're doing that one thing. So he's treating them to do their profession, he says awkwardly. But then he also helps them. He gets his goal, like, this is how we're going to fight, this is how we're going to do that. And he spends it with the one girl and seems to form quite a nice bond with her. She wants him there.
But she's not part of the crew. And so she's not one of the people who I want him to have that kind of bond with.
Okay.
He should have that kind of bond with people that he's supposed to be loyal to, and he doesn't.
I think that's just Jane. I think, you've said before, Jane's loyal to Jane. He's not loyal to anybody else. He does what his captain tells him to because that's who's paying him. But I think that that's just who Jane is. Like, self-preservation is number one. Self-preservation / money is number one. And it's just something that Mal has learned to live with and understands about him and knows that he can't fully trust him. I don't think he has too many places to go this early in the story. I think it would take a lot more of him learning real life lessons to come around. And it's something we don't get to see.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the future Jane-specific episodes would look like, other than he gets his own ship and then becomes an antagonist.
I would actually hope that his arc would be more like Spike's in Buffy, that he starts out as an asshat and eventually becomes integral to the group. Granted, Spike was still a dick a lot of the time, and he did it for the money sometimes, but he eventually became part of the group.
I'm pretty sure that's where they were going with Jane, because they did make him kind of an endearing character. So many people would not love him so much if he didn't have these endearing qualities, but he just hadn't gotten to the point where he was likable yet. There was just something about him, his humor, his stupidity, and everything else that kind of endear people to him. And I feel like I think that's where they were going with him. They just didn't have time to get there.
On the Women at Warp podcast, they had a really interesting conversation about season 1 of Voyager. And one of the characters in that is Neelix, who's kind of bumbling, a bit annoying, and he's supposed to be their guide through this uncharted region, or this unexplored region of space, and he ends up having to lie and cover himself because he's trying to show that he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's trying to make up reasons that he should be there. And then towards the end of the season, he has an episode called Jatrell, where we get a lot of backstory about some pretty horrific stuff in his past, and it's a really, really good episode. But it just comes too late. By that point, you're kind of done with the character, or he's kind of set in this bumbling thing. Amanda, you took against Jane pretty quickly. I'm wondering if something like him getting the hat or Janestown coming sooner would have helped with the character.
No, because I didn't like him in any of those episodes anyway. I mean, those moments did nothing to endear him to me. I don't think. I would say if Ariel had come later, that might have helped him a little bit, but I had already kind of thought of him as irredeemable before that. And so I don't know that there's anything in these episodes that could have been done differently that would make me like him more.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So we've touched on River and talked about she seems to match up to what you remember for a few seconds. And of course, we get all those fantastic answers about the history of Shepherd Book.
Yeah.
Can I tell you the last line that's ever said about him is, he ain't a shepherd. How can that be the last thing that's really told to us? That's not okay. I need more. Thank goodness there's a graphic novel I can go read now.
Oh, he has that lovely end sequence with Jane where they're working out, and he says that he put up such a fight against Jewel early. There were going to be poems and songs.
No. True.
In every episode, we've spoken about the world and it not quite making sense or seeming slightly odd. Let's go into that now. Now we've got a fuller picture of it all.
To me, I'm just going to go with what I said last week. I accept it for what it is because it is what it is. And beyond that, I got nothing.
So I have been dying and dying and dying to talk about this.
We're there. We've made it.
Yeah, you guys made it pretty clear that you didn't want me to spoil it before this part. If you listen or go through and watch this season or the series commentary, the very first episode commentary talks about the world, and it's based in a world that, there was Earth that was, it got used up. The two superpower countries in Earth that was the United States and China. And so those two cultures kind of formed the alliance, and that's why the world is so Western and Asian. So I don't think it ever gets fully explained in the actual episodes, but it's something that is hinted at throughout. And it's really kind of a brilliant world, in my opinion, because essentially the United States and China are two of the biggest superpowers in real life right now. And to see the two worlds or the two countries' cultures meshing up like that is just not something that you really could have imagined before Firefly.
Yeah, there is a bit of shared DNA going on that you can trace the history of this from Firefly through to Big Hero 6, which is a fully, San Francisco as though it was made by the Japanese. There's a huge mix there. And this could be part of the start of that idea creeping into modern media.
That's true. Big Hero 6 was really good, by the way.
Although personally, I have a cynical view of that the Japan section of Epcot in Florida doesn't really have a a historic movie or something from Disney that they could put in there, so they made one. Same way
Okay.
Frozen is now the Norway film, so that's where Anna and Elsa hang out.
Okay. So, something that's interesting to me, and I didn't even really think about this until I don't even remember which episode this was. It was one of these last five where my brain is trying to think which episode it was. It was the message. In the beginning when they're in like this the weird like Times Square billboardy circus space station thing and the guy is selling, tickets to go in and see proof of alien life, which is of course a cow fetus. But it didn't occur to me until that scene that this is a space show that takes place on all these different worlds and planets, and yet there's no alien life. It's all human. And that's a unique take on a space show, a sci-fi show, I think, and I kind of really like that.
I think that's actually really smart because, if in real life, if we were to go out and terraform other planets, there would only be so far that we could go and still really survive as a civilization. And I feel like any alien life would be farther out than that.
Yes, because they would be trying to stay away from the crazy of the humans.
That too.
We'd know about it by now, that's for sure. It's a really interesting sequence because it's so reminiscent of Farscape that was in its third or fourth season by this point, and that features a lot of market areas, situations, civilizations that are very reminiscent of this. But that show is all about a human amongst aliens, and there are no other humans. So it really does sort of twist my memory of that kind of scene.
I had no idea that's what that show was about.
Also, humans and aliens interacting in space shows. It's been done. It's there's so many shows and movies that have humans interacting with aliens. Like there's Star Wars, there's Star Trek, all these other shows, and I don't know, having only humans in a space show, it's a little different.
I think it'd be really good for us to talk a bit about the ensemble and all the relationships that develop between the actors.
I have to say, even with my hatred of Jane, I do think this is one of the best ensemble casts that I've ever seen on television.
Agree.
Yeah, I think so. There's quite a mix of personality types, of character types that everyone brings to it, and because everyone is so committed. I've mentioned once or twice, Jane is fantastic because he's got this sort of very solid characterization. But he is big and quite dumb, and only has one or two things on his mind at any one time. But he always does that. There's no moments that you get from, and particularly a lot of Whedon shows, where you get some quippiness from people that betrays an intelligence above themselves, just because it was a good line and they wanted to throw it in. The one time that stands out to me, and I can't even remember what the quip is, but I remember Inara does it at one point, and it just stands out because she's not a quippy, funny person. No, it might even be a Jane one from that last episode, where she says that no one likes thinking what's in his head.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
remember that.
which is a great line. For me, it doesn't fit with an Ara. It fits with a Wash, or even a Kaylee, or a Zoe, or Mel. But they obviously thought it was funny. She hadn't said anything in the scene yet, so let's give her a line.
I don't know. After some of her quips, like when that first episode with Saffron in it, she told Mal that she hoped they had hundreds of fat children. After some of those quips, I didn't see it as out of character for her.
Yeah, and particularly the opening scene in Saffron, where everyone's joking about him having a wife, and she's just stood there in shock and telling everyone to actually be somewhat civilized and considerate to this woman. She can't find it funny. But the point was, I quite liked that everyone had a very solid idea of who their character was, and they're all different, and they don't tend to break it too much.
Yes.
Possibly because there's only 14 episodes, of course. They
Well,
don't get the
yeah,
chance
there's
to.
that.
Yeah. Perhaps they could have done with Jane what they do with Gunn at the end of Angel.
Oh, no.
Spoilers for Angel, in case anyone hasn't seen it. But they could make Jane really intelligent and smooth and stuff. Or could you imagine Adam Baldwin in a really nice suit, looking really sharp and talking really nicely?
Yes, because he did it in Angel. He played one of the liaisons
Marcus
between
Hamilton.
Angel and the senior partners.
Yeah,
So,
Adam Baldwin did?
he did. He is
yes,
Marcus
Huh.
did.
Hamilton.
I have to go back and watch that. I know I've seen him. He was in Independence Day as one of the like FBI agents or
Dudes. Yeah.
something.
No, he is.
Huh,
He
I
is
don't remember that.
terrific an Angel.
Yeah, so in Independence Day, when they're about to shoot the glass where the alien's killing the scientist,
Oh,
somebody
you're
asks,
right.
"Is that
Mm.
glass bulletproof?" And he goes, "No, sir."
Do that again.
I do remember that now.
No, sir.
Arr. The theme song. Do we have any thoughts or opinions on the theme song? Could we just sing it all now for a bit?
I don't know all the words to it yet.
I don't think it's really a group sing along type song. It's a little slow,
It is a
but
little
I love
slow.
it. I love it so much.
I do too. I hated it at first. It's very different from what you expect in a TV theme show because it's not catchy or quippy. It's just kind of a ballad. And you don't usually get lyrical ballads when we're talking TV theme shows. When it's lyrical, you get things like The Golden Girls or Cheers or Full House. You don't get these slow, melodic, singing words because that's what lyrical means. And so I hated it. It wasn't what I expected it to be, but I didn't ever skip it. And so I listened to it all 14 times going through this. And by the end of it, I really liked it.
I really like it as a song. It was my ringtone from the release of Firefly until Lost came out, and then it became You All Everybody. You All Everybody. That one. Um,
I love it when you sing on this podcast.
it's funny because you're right. It's very slow, and having sung theme tunes it feels quite old fashioned to me. It feels a very kind of 70s and 80s sitcom thing. And the one that it puts me in mind of is actually Star Trek Enterprise that came out the year before this, which has a song called Faith of the Heart, originally performed by Rod Stewart, but in this it's sung by, I want to say Russell Watson, and it's a complete misfit for a Star Trek series to have this. I got Faith of the Heart, and it's all croony nice, but yet for some reason it fits on Firefly really well. Possibly because of
It
the
does.
Western theme, and it's got these Western style instruments and sound.
Well, I think the visual of the credits help with
Mm,
that too,
yeah.
just because it matches so well, and the animation of the words that are glowing as it's progressing, I just think as a whole, it just works together really nicely. And it's nice to see something done differently.
Mm.
You don't want everything to be the same.
And moving on to other bits of the production, do we have any opinions on the episode names?
I thought they were fine.
Well, I need you to ask
Okay.
the question so I can ask you my question.
Why do Joss Whedon shows have really bad episode names?
Why do you think these are bad?
Because I can never remember them. There's nothing in them that stands out. No. I'm going to take out words like never and ever and always. But generally, like, out of gas does not describe that episode. They are not out of gas.
I think it described it pretty well because the ship was broken down in that episode. And I mean, yeah, it wasn't out of gas, but it was out of power, and gas is power. And, sometimes when I'm really tired and not going to do anything, I say that I'm out of gas, even though I don't use gas for power. I think it was just a metaphor, something.
If the episode had been called Broken Down, I could have gone with it. But we have episodes called things like Safe. And I have no idea what happens in the episode Safe or Trash or Bushwhacked. It just means nothing. I'd have to go and look at something for that episode to say, oh, yeah, I can understand what's happening there. Even episodes that have, the shows that have very florid titles, there's usually something that allows you to latch onto. I can understand that that episode has that thing in it.
You know, I have never, ever once paid attention to the title of an episode. I think in this case, maybe it was because they were trying not to spoil what the episodes were actually about. Like if you said Broken Down Ship is the name of the episode, then we're expecting a broken down ship. If you say Out of Gas, it's a little more fuzzy. You're not quite sure what to expect.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts about this.
Hmm.
One, originally, episode titles were not meant to be consumed by the masses. They were more internal for the writers to be able to refer to specific episodes. They weren't widely available. They were not published on screen before the episode the way they are now. When you do Netflix or Hulu, you see them. They may have been published in the TV guide, but they weren't widely available, especially pre-internet. And so that's why you do get some really simple one word episode titles. But in general, I think that a lot of these, metaphorically speaking, worked pretty well, like safe. I think that worked. Because in the end of the episode, they are all safe. That's the episode where at the end they're all together at the table. That's where the found family starts. And so for me, I can totally identify safe with that. Some of the other ones, Bushwhacked, I have no idea what that episode was about. I couldn't tell you. But some of the other ones, like Heart of Gold, I think it's because it's about a whorehouse called Heart of Gold.
Hmm.
And so that's going to be more one of those internal things. It wasn't really meant for mass consumption. And I think that's true for a lot of episodes that were in early TV, 90s and early thousands TV.
I think the titles were intended to be used, and certainly out there in the wider public. By this point, we'd had, I think, the entire run. Yeah, well, no, we must have had the entire run of at least Star Trek Next Gen, if not DS9 as well. And they always put episode titles up, and it was an established thing. I'm going to be the provocative one. I think Joss Whedon shows do not have good names.
You don't like Buffy episode titles?
Generally, no. They're
Oh,
just.
come on, Double Meat Palace. Come on now.
I'd say I'm edging away from saying always and never. There are some in there, and Seeing Red, if we go on a topical one, yeah, that definitely describes that episode really well. But there's a lot in there that are just rubbish.
Okay,
Anyway,
fair enough.
good.
Fair enough.
Glad I've been provocative.
You're always provocative, Matthew.
Hey,
So let's talk about some Star Wars Easter eggs that I didn't even notice until I started Googling fun facts about Firefly. Apparently, more than once, you can actually see spaceships from Star Wars in Firefly.
That is not something I've ever noticed. I've actually never noticed any of the Easter eggs. I guess that's why they're called Easter eggs.
So I know that in the pilot Serenity, when Inara's shuttle is taking off, in the background you can see one of the Imperial spaceships from Star Wars. And there's another spaceship in Shindig. I just don't remember which one it was. And then Han Solo has a cameo in every single episode. In the background, in one of the scenes of every episode, supposedly, is a 12-inch Han Solo in carbonite.
That is something I'd heard before, but I've never looked for it.
I
yeah,
didn't see it. I will look for it now. The only one that I know about is in the message because that's the image that was accompanying the article about it. And so it's in Kaylee's quarters behind her when she's in the hammock. But the next time I go through this, I'm going to be looking for it to see if I can see it.
I've spotted it in the mess before. I can't remember which episode now. But you're right. Han Solo is in every episode because that's who Matt Reynolds is.
Absolutely. Did you guys know that a copy of both Firefly and the Serenity movie are parts of the International Space Station's permanent library now?
I did not know that, but they're rightfully so. They belong there.
I think it's really cool. It's because in 2007, American astronaut Stephen Ray Swanson was sent to the International Space Station, and he brought DVD copies of both of them because he's such a big fan of Firefly.
Well, at least they don't take up much space on the shelf.
Aww.
Oh, that took me a second. That was mean.
And the last thing I wanted to call attention to is just a production element that I thought was really cool. And I don't think I actually picked up on it while I was watching it, but in hindsight, I remember in the real world, there's no sound in space because space is a vacuum. And so, in all of the scenes that actually took place in space, there were no sound effects. There was music, but you couldn't actually hear like them walking on the ship, like when Jubal Early was walking across. In any other production, you would have heard the thumps of the magnet on the bottom of his boots hitting the top of the spaceship. We didn't get any of that because Joss Whedon said there's no sound in space, so we're not going to have sound in space. And I thought that was really cool.
That is
Yeah,
cool.
I always pick up on it on the opening of the first episode where they're blowing out the door to raid the ship that they found, and it stands out because it's so unusual.
You're right. I don't think I picked up on it at that point because I was just trying to figure out who these people were and what they were doing. But you're right, it was
Mm,
silent, and in most shows or movies, it would have been a big, loud explosion.
yeah, I can see why he does it. I think I prefer it with noises. I think it works there, and reality is no defense for fiction.
Yeah, that's what they say. I'm not sure I agree with that, but
If we're talking on minor points, I quite like one line in Trash. See, I had to try and remember the second one with Saffron.
that would be trash. The one where she ends up literally in the trash, Matthew.
Yeah, because she is trash. Oh, it's got a double meaning. Zoogma. Um, yeah, I got to use the word Zoogma on a podcast. Yay me.
I
Um,
don't know what that word is, so.
I
it's
don't either.
it's when you have a word that has two meanings. So she is trash and she's in trash. Trash. Anyway, carrying quickly on, and she says about how, or he's explaining to the chap that she's now married, that she married him, about a half a year back, and it's really nice because it doesn't feel like half a year. It's only a few episodes on, but they're showing us that the world is just continuing. This isn't a week, and every single week they have some sort of crazy adventure or something. It's not like just a fortnight has passed. It's been quite a time.
Well, they did that too with the cows.
Yes, they've been on the ship a month at that point, even though it's one episode on. Yeah, I like that because I don't like that in Star Trek where it just seems to be. Oh, in fact, no, even in Buffy, it must be Tuesday. Dawn's in trouble.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think it's perfectly fair and reasonable for a television show to mostly be in real time. And I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's cool when it's not because that's not the standard. But I don't think it's a bad thing for shows to be shown in real time, especially when it's a show that takes place kind of, over the course of 9 months of the year.
Yeah, it's that Harry Potter and Buffy thing of there seems to be a lot of action between September and May, and then either school ends or the series ends, and nothing happens for a few months.
That's okay though, because we don't get to see it. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, I don't know.
I just like it.
Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about, these episodes or the series as a whole? We are running a little bit long again.
Sarah, now that we've watched all the series, when do you think we should watch Serenity?
I mean, like I think it's really a Mandy question, but my personal opinion would be to go ahead and do it now while all of the details from Firefly are still fresh in our brains.
Oh, well, now you can't ask them this question because she already answered it.
No, no, that's absolutely fine. Mandy, do you agree? Do you think it would be better to have the break that the world, not necessarily the 2 years everyone got, but a little bit of time?
I want to take a little bit of time because I would actually like to rewatch all 14 episodes before we do the movie. So I want to give it a couple weeks and do Serenity, maybe in April-ish.
Okay. I'm a fan of waiting in real time. I don't like going from straight through a cliffhanger at the end of a season. I think it's important to have a break to consider everything you've seen and then move into it.
Okay, wait, you just said you're a fan of waiting in real time. So does that mean we can't do it for 2 years?
We
Yeah,
can't
I'm
do it.
not waiting 2 years.
I don't
Sorry.
mean it in real time, but I mean in the real world, having a break between the watching, not going straight from one season to another.
I do like that you're confident this podcast will still be going in 2 years, though. So, hey.
Yeah, I think it's okay to wait as long as we do rewatch the series between now and then. But I just don't want there to be a lull between us watching the series and discussing Serenity. So if we wait, it would be entirely appropriate to rewatch the entire Firefly series.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to rewatch it anyway, just because considering how much I disliked the first four episodes, now that I am in love with these characters, I really want to go back and rewatch them and see how I feel now that I know who they are and understand them more. And I'm really excited to do that.
Cool. We will hopefully return to this subject in a few weeks, folks.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week with another episode of Pop Culturally Deprived where we'll talk about the 80s classic Heathers. Until then, please remember to rate and review us on iTunes if you like what we do. If you want to get in touch or be on a future episode, you can follow me on Twitter at Mandy K. You can email me at mandyk@popculturallydeprived.com, or you can comment on this post on popculturallydeprived.com. You can also find Sarah on Twitter at skepticallysarah,
Remember, that's Sarah with no H.
and Matthew is at Matthew Vos. Until then, I'm Mandy K.
And am I a lion? I don't think of myself as a lion. You might as well, though. I have a mighty roar.